Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I want to share with you a little bit longer of a video. I'm going to have a follow along digital stamping tutorial. For this tutorial I will be using Adobe Photoshop Elements, and I will also be using the Cup of Joy digital stamp set from Clair stamps. All the supplies, everything I'm using in the tutorial will be listed down in the description box below. So the first thing I'm going to do whenever I open up Photoshop Elements is open up my digital stamp page. So this is how Clair Stamps digital stamps come. They come in this very large 8.5 by 11 sheet. So if you have no program to work with digital stamps, all you need to do with these stamps is just print them out. But I want to show you how you can kind of kick it up a notch. So off to the right hand side is your Layers tab. Now off to the right of the layer that I am working on, there is like this little lock layer. What I want to do is actually click that and unlock the layer. That's going to allow the white background to be removed. I want to change this into a PNG with a clear background because I want to layer up these stamps. So I click that little button and now I am ready to go to work. I am using the magic wand tool. Off to the left you see the little wand with the star on top. That is the tool I am using. All I do now is click on the white space in the background. Then, once that's selected, I'll go ahead and right click and click Layer via Cut. That's going to take all that white background and put it on a separate layer. Then off to the right, I'm going to go ahead and click that little eyeball off to the left of the new white layer and just see how it looks. Now, I feel like this took a little bit too much. You can see on the bottom as I scroll down, the top looks okay. Everything looks okay. The sentiments I'm not worried about. I'll show you how I deal with those later. But off to the left, right here, you see that cup had a little bit taken too much out of it. So there are a few different ways you can go about fixing this. Click your back button. Your back button's your best friend. And then go back into your magic wand tool and click down on the very bottom and you'll have those four little options. You want to subtract from the layer that you chose. Now that's one option. Here's my better option that I like to do. I'll just click back until I'm to the point where everything's back on one layer and I haven't selected anything yet. Then, in my little toolbox for my magic wand, you have a threshold button. Or excuse me, it's a tolerance little slider button. I'm going to bring that number down. That is going to select less. It's going to recognize those black lines a little bit more. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing. I clicked on it with my magic wand, right clicked, then layer via cut. Then I can go off to my layer on the right hand side, click that little eyeball on the new white layer where it's removed the background to, and that is going to show me what I have left on my sheet. Now that little checked background, that is what you want. That indicates a clear layer, so don't freak out. That's all that is. Now you may be wondering why I am not completely removing that white layer if I don't need it anymore. You can, but I will show you why I am not on this project later on when I go to use my sentiments. Now once I have the clear background, it's time to start taking this to a new project, selecting the stamps I want, cropping them out, and bringing them into a new project. So what I need to use is the crop tool. Now again, anytime you select a tool over on the left hand side of your little tool tabs, it's going to bring up options down at the very bottom of the screen. For this, you want to crop with no restrictions. So that way you can get as close to the black lines as possible with your crop tool. Because it's a clear background, it doesn't matter so much, but you don't want a ton of space working around that whenever you bring it into your new project. It makes it just a little bit more easier. So I am just using my mouse and those little squares to drop this in, bring it in, drag and drop, and then when I'm happy with the crop, I'll click my green little button, and there is my new little layer. Now, I want to bring this into a new project. So I'm going to click Control N on my keyboard, and that is going to bring up this little dialog box. Now, in my options, I'm going to click a custom size. I want to make sure that my size is in inches, and I am going to make this the size of a regular A2 size panel. That's what I like to work with. So I'm going to go 4¼ inches by 5.5 inches, 5½ inches. And I'm changing my resolution to 300, and I'm having a white background. Once I have that selected, I'll click OK. Now down at the bottom, if you have your photo bin, which is at the very bottom off to the very far left side, you click that little button. That's going to bring up your project bin or your photo bin where you have all of your different projects. What I like to do is click that. I'll have all my projects, and then I just drag and drop that flower right into my new project. I'll show you again, because now I'm going to go ahead and click my back button until I'm at the point where I have my clear background, but I haven't cropped yet. And then I am going to go ahead and crop around the leaf. That's the next little piece I'm going to bring over into my new project. So I've cropped around that now, clicked my little green arrow. I'm going back to my photo bin, and then I'll click on my new project, which will open that up. Drag and drop that leaf, and it's going to bring it into the new project on another layer. Now, once you start getting so many different layers going on, I like to go and rename them. All you do is go to the layers on the right-hand side of your project, right-click on it, and click Rename. Then you can just rename it to whatever you want. I'm renaming mine Flower and Leaf, so I know which ones I'm working with. Then you can go in and start layering these up, moving them around. If you go and you click with your little move tool, which is off to the left-hand side in your tool tab, I'll show you in just a moment again after I crop around another image. That is going to move everything around. That is what you use to turn things and layer things. So again, I just cropped around this little cookie, and then I'm clicking down onto my photo bin, opening my new project, and dragging and dropping that cookie into the project. Then off to the left, you see that little arrow that I just clicked. That's your move tool. That's going to allow you to move these different layers around, layer them up, turn them, resize them, play around, and have fun. To move or to turn, like I just turned that little cookie, all you have to do is use that move tool, click on the object, and then go to a corner. That's going to bring up an arrow that has a little curve to it with an arrow on both ends. Click that and then just turn it with your mouse. That's going to turn it to the left, to the right, give you whatever angle you want. Now again, I'm dragging and dropping in these two little cookies. And again, I'm going to rename these. That way as I'm building up my layers, I can remember what is what. So I'll go off to the right-hand side, right-click on the layer, and rename. Then I'll just rename it single cookie and double cookie, so I know what I'm dealing with as I go in to start duplicating layers. Now, once I have all of the images that I want to use on here, I can start to duplicate my layers. So right click on the layer and click Duplicate Layer. That's going to bring up a dialog box that asks you to name it. It's going to give you just the name of the layer and then copy. That's what I normally go with. You can change it if you want to. And then all you do is use your move tool, because it's going to pop up right on top of that layer that you duplicated. Use your move tool so you see you have two layers. It's going to look like nothing happened, but I promise it did. Just use your move tool and move that over, and it's right there. Now I'm doing the same thing with the leaves, adding a few more leaves behind this little flower. Now as you're layering this up, you might come to a point where something is in front of something else. Like perhaps if I had duplicated this leaf and it popped up on top of the flower in front of it instead of behind it like it's supposed to be. All you need to do is go over to your Layers tab and drag and drop that layer below the layer you want it behind. The closer the layer is to the background, the further behind everything else it's going to be. So one of the things I love about digital stamping is you can change anything you want with this. You can change the size of the stamps, you can change the orientation, you can move them around once they're down on your project. Um, with real stamping, as soon as you stamp it down, it's there to stay. You can't erase it, you can't redo unless you get a new piece of paper. But with digital stamping, all it takes is a delete. That's all it takes, or use your back button. So as you go about making your panel, just know that anything you do can be undone. So move your images around, have fun, play around with the placement. It really is up to you how long you want to work on it, how quick you want to work on it, how much you want to move stuff around, how much you want to play with things. It's just about having fun. And remember, the back tool and the delete button are going to be your best friend. So I went ahead and brought in that other flower just to kind of round out my background. And then I'm just checking to make sure there's nothing else I want to bring in and add. And then I'm just going to start duplicating layers and rearranging now that I have everything on my panel that I want to be. So I'll rename my little flower very quickly so I know which one I'm working with. And then I'm going to duplicate this. And once it duplicates, it's going to look like nothing happened, but I promise it did. Just take it and move it around with your move tool. That is important to remember because there are many times where I have tried to move something and it won't move. And that's because I'm not using that move tool. To move things around in Photoshop Elements, you need to be using that little tool. So I'm going to continue to duplicate and move around the different layers. And again, renaming those layers really helps so I can know what layer I am dealing with. Now, if ever there is a time that you want to move multiple layers at once, say I got, like I did earlier, I had my flower and my two leaves. I want those to stay connected. What you do is click on the layer, hold your control button down on your keyboard, and then click the other layers that you want to link to that. That is going to make them blue like they're selected on the right hand side of the layers tab. Then once you have the layer selected, either use your arrows on your keyboard, which is what I like to do just because I don't like to mess with the mouse one much when they're all connected. I feel like I'm going to click it off. So I like to use the arrows on my keyboard and move them that way. Now again, I am just going to continue to duplicate and make this full, make my background full. And that is again why I like to work in the size panel that I will be printing. Now, if you wanted to, you could go in and do some 6x6 papers this way. That would be really fun. But I'm going to go ahead and just continue to fill out this 4¼ by 5½ inch panel until I'm happy with it. Now, as I continue to duplicate and move my layers around again to fill out this panel, turn my images and kind of build them up, I do want to say if this is a tutorial you like and you want to see more of techniques like this, slowed down, a little bit longer videos, please let me know down in the comments so I can know to continue making these. These do take a little bit of time to make and a lot of time to edit and voice over. So if this is something you want to see more of, please let me know down in the comments below. Now, at some point, you are going to start getting a lot of layers. That's okay. If it gets confusing, and say you want that one single flower or that one single leaf, but you're not quite sure which layer it is onto the right side, all you need to do is take your move tool and click on that image on the panel itself. That's going to highlight the layer on the right hand side. So say you have a leaf and you want to delete it, but you don't know exactly which leaf layer it is. Is it copy 1? Is it copy 2, 3, 4, 5? Maybe you have 16 layers at that point and you don't know which one it is. Use your move tool, click on that image, and that will highlight the layer on the right hand side. And then that way you know which one you're dealing with if there's something specific that you want to do with that layer. Now, as you're filling this out, remember whenever you are stamping a true background, there are going to be images that hang off the side. pattern papers, when you cut them, you're cutting some images on the sides of the paper in half, and whenever you cut it down to size. So make sure that some of these images are hanging off the edges. It's not going to cut it off in the program. It will still be there. So if you decide, oh, maybe I want to move that up a little bit, but you're scared the image is lost once it's cut off, it's not. It's still there. You can still move it up, move it around. The whole image is still there. It's just not on the screen. And as I continue to fill this out and fill this in, you're going to see me go back in and move a lot of different layers around, space them out a little bit more. If you're having trouble spacing out with your mouse, you can always use your arrows on your keyboard as well. Say you just want to move it a smidge, the arrows on your keyboard are going to be your best friends for that. It helps just to kind of nudge things over just a little bit at a time. Another tool you really want to utilize is turning those images when you're moving them around. That is going to give them appearance, just like when you're stamping. You move your stamps as you stamp it over and over to fill out a background. I have tons of tutorials on that. As you move it around, it creates kind of this optical illusion of using a different stamp. So use this program just like you would a stamp and continue to move and turn those images and manipulate them. You can even go in, make some smaller, make some larger. It really is up to you how you want your final project to look. So really go in and utilize all those different options you have with your digital stamps, resizing, turning, manipulating them tons of different ways. Now, as I continue to fill in this background, I wanted to add a little extra leaf onto that flower that I only had one leaf behind. All I needed to do was go back in, duplicate a leaf layer, and move it over. Now, if it was too close to any of the other stamps, I could have just moved those over as well and kind of filled out that area. Now I'm just taking a look, kind of slowing it down a little bit, duplicating, and just seeing what empty spots I see until I'm happy with the way this looks. Now, if ever there is a time like here where I duplicated a layer and I moved it over because I thought I wanted to fill in this space, but I don't really like it, all I have to do is click my delete button. That's all it takes. So I'll click the layer, click delete on my keyboard. It will bring up a dialog box if you're sure you want to delete it, just in case you didn't hit it by mistake. It kind of has that built-in safety. All you need to do is click yes, and it will delete. Then once I have it the way I want it, I'm going to go down to the very bottom background layer, right click, and flatten the image. And that is the background. It was really that simple. It's just a lot of duplicating and a lot of manipulating those images with the move tool. So when I am on the computer and I am doing my digital stamping, I like to do a lot at once. So I knew I wanted also a focal point from this stamp set. What I'm going to do is go ahead and again create a new project so I can create that focal point as well. I'm going to use this little cup in the top right hand corner that's the very plain cup. So I went ahead and cropped around it on that very first project that I did with the clear background. Then I opened up a new project that is 4¼ by 5½, and I'm going to drag and drop the little cup into that new project just like I did before. Now at first I thought I was going to place the cup in the bottom left hand corner and kind of do a die cut around it so you would see a lot of the background on top behind that die cut. Um, and the good thing about this is I can change my mind in the middle of it. I was able to move this around and manipulate the images, so I didn't have to do any restamping. So I went ahead and I got my little cup cropped out, and then I clicked the back button on that first image where I took out the white background, and that is because I want one of those sentiments. Now you can have the sentiments have a clear background as well, but it takes a little bit more manipulating with your magic wand tool and with the tolerance and just a little bit more work. So I like to just keep them with a white background. So I use that back button until it's exactly like it was to begin with, crop around my sentiment, go back to my original project in my photo bin, and then just drag and drop right into the new project. Now, when I brought this sentiment in, I wasn't happy with having it on top of the cup like I thought I wanted it to be. And then it just didn't quite look right down in the corner. So I decided to go ahead and put this kind of in the top center, and I was going to cut around that, make it into a nice little square panel on my card. Now I'm just going to arrange these because once they are printed, you can't, I mean, you can reprint obviously, but you can't really change it once it's on the paper, kind of like with real stamping. So I also want to go ahead and add in a few of the single cookies, which I didn't think I was going to do, but I decided to do later. That's no big deal. We're going to go with the same steps. Magic wand tool, white background, right click on that background, uh, copy via cut, and that's going to bring in that new white layer on top. Click your little eyeball so it hides that white background, and then just crop around the image that you want. Then we're going to drag and drop into that new layer. Now here is where those layers on the right come in handy. My cookie was behind my cup. I want it on top of my cup. So I'm going to take that layer and drag and drop it above the cup layer. Remember, the closer the layer is to the background, the further behind all the other objects it's going to be. So if you have a layer that's on top of another layer, it's going to be in front of it. The ordering of layers can get a little confusing. If you have trouble with it, just play with it. Remember, anything can be undone in digital stamping. And here's where manipulating these images comes in so handy. I wanted my cookie to be smaller, much smaller, so it could fit on the little saucer of the cup. So I'll go back in and I manipulated it to where it's sitting on the little saucer. I'm going to zoom in so I make sure I get a nice kind of look to it to where it doesn't look like it's just floating in midair. And then I decided I wanted another cookie. So I'm just going to duplicate that layer. Again, it's going to look like nothing happened, but use your move tool and just move it over. Then I'm going to manipulate it just a little bit, turn it so it just has a different angle on it. And there is my little cup and saucer and two cookies that just took a few clicks of my mouse, literally. Now, once I'm happy with everything, I decided as I was looking at it, I needed to move my sentiment over. Again, I'm going to use my little arrows on my keyboard for that, just to kind of nudge it over. Once I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to flatten my image. Now, I want to show you one last thing before it's time to print. When you go back to that very original document that you were working on, your digital stamp set, and you close it out, do not save any of the changes you've made. If you want to save them under a different name. Do not save them on that original project. It is going to alter it to where it cannot be undone. Do not save it. If you want to save it under a different name. Okay, I just want to make that perfectly clear. So now it's time to print. If I were to print as is, it's going to print on two separate sheets of cardstock right in the middle. I want to combine these into one, so it prints on one sheet of cardstock, and I only need to use that one sheet of cardstock. So again, I'm using that drag and drop feature. I opened up a new project to the paper size that I have, which is 8.5 by 11. It has a US paper option in there. It also has a few other options in there. And then I just drag and drop my panels into that 8.5 by 11 new project using that little photo bin or project bin down at the bottom and dragging and dropping. Then I can turn and twist these to where they're both fit. I like to leave a little margin around the sides so it's not getting cut off by my printer if the paper's a little wonky in there. And then once everything's good to go on there, I can go ahead and print. So you won't see me click File, Print on here. I use Control P whenever I do print. It's just a habit, but you can also go up to the top, click File, click Print. Once it's ready to print, you're going to want to change a few settings if you're printing on something um, other than computer paper. So I am using a laser printer to do my printing. You can add crop marks as you can see here in your More Options tool. That's more if you're printing for one panel. I find that works really well, but here I'm printing two, so I'm going to not print with any crop marks, but I am going to go into page setup and change my options to lightweight cardstock. That is my option for printing with the printer I am printing with, and I wanted lightweight cardstock because I am going to foil that background. Now here's a look at everything all printed off. I printed off to 80-pound Neenah cardstock using my laser printer. I have found that the 80-pound cardstock foils so much better than my 120-pound cardstock. I am guessing because it's thinner, more heat can get through. That would be my guess, but it just works so much better. So I printed these both off onto 80-pound cardstock, and then I'm just going to trim them out really roughly for my background. And then I trimmed out my little focal point down to a nice square, just using my paper trimmer to get it all nice and even. I went ahead and colored in my focal point with a few alcohol markers. Because I laser printed, I was able to print with my alcohol markers. Now I'm going to go ahead and foil this background. I've got my little carrier sheet, and I will be using Deco Foil in Pewter. Now, foiling only works with laser printed images. If you have an inkjet, it won't work. So I'll show you the sandwich really quickly of how I like to put this through my laminator. So I have my carrier sheet, which is just a piece of parchment paper. Then I have my panel with the printed side up, and my foil, you have a shiny side and you have a dull side. I'm going to put the dull side facing the foil, shiny or pretty side up. Then I'll go ahead and put that into the carrier sheet and run that through my laminator. My laminator is a Royal Sovereign. I use it on the 5 mil setting, and I let it heat up for a good 20 to 30 minutes before I do my foiling. Then I go ahead and put my carrier sheet through my parchment paper with the folded side first. Super important. I've done it the other way. It doesn't work. It will get jammed. So folded side first. Now when it comes out, I like to let it cool off for a minute, and then I can go ahead and peel off that foil, and I'll have a beautifully foiled background. And the 80-pound cardstock just works so much better. I mean, look at that shine. I love foiling. It gives such a wow effect on my handmade cards. Now, I used a little bit of leftover foil on the bottom of that, and I added it to the thinking of you sentiment down there on the bottom of my colored focal point, and I'm just going to go ahead and put that through my laminator as well. And I have this fun foiled sentiment now, and that little touch just kind of brought the whole card together. All that was left to do was put this card together. I went ahead and trimmed down that background to about 4 inches by 5 1/4 and attached it onto an A2 top folding card base. Then I matted my colored panel, my colored focal point, with a piece of black cardstock and popped that up with dimensional adhesive onto that background to completely finish off this card. And there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you heard sniffling, I sound a little funny. My daughter's next to me. We're both suffering from allergies right now. So sorry about it, but it is what it is when you're stay-at-home mom. So thanks for watching and happy crafting, everyone.